I think if you get people to self-reflect with open-ended questions, they sometimes get there on their own. It doesn't always happen in the first conversation, but the more you do it and the more you practice as a team doing it, you'll start to see people say, interesting. They might pause because they realize that they're actually talking about their own personal feelings versus the facts of the situation.
Mita, thank you for joining us today. And as always, everyone, we're super excited to have you with us today. So today we are honored to feature Mita Mallick, a trailblazing leader and best-selling author. Mita is currently spearheading inclusion, equity, and impact at Carta, and she's renowned for her transformative impact in the corporate world, particularly at Unilever, where she pioneered inclusive practices. Her powerful story, shaped by her upbringing as the daughter of Indian immigrants in the U.S., underlines her commitment to giving a voice to diverse perspectives. Mita's insights extend beyond the boardroom. Her writing has graced the pages of Fast Company, The New York Post, and Business Insider. Her book, Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace, has been celebrated as a top business read. And let me tell you, if you're in the HR space or if you are in the DEI space, I highly encourage you, especially given our current climate, to go grab a copy of that book. So Mita, welcome to the Embracing Only podcast. There's so much about your background that Archita and I resonate with, from being immigrants and working in corporate and having some experiences. We're just so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for this conversation. Thank you both.
Of course, we're so excited. So we're going to jump right into it. As always, Archita and I have 1,000 questions, so we want to make sure we have a good use of time here. But before we get into the meat of your book, as immigrants ourselves, working in the corporate space and being executives in the corporate space, we resonate so much with your stories. But as I was listening to all of the podcasts that you've done and some of the other talks that you've done outside of your own, I kept coming back to this thought, like, what got you down this path in the first place? Because all of us have had triggers or experiences that push us into this work where we're like, okay, enough is enough. Like, I need to do something. What was that trigger for you, or series of triggers, that made you start to pour yourself into this DEI space, and even more so writing the book and really having quite a loud voice in this area?
I don't think it's one thing that happened overnight. Like you just said, it's a series of things that happen slowly. It's when I went to see my forever First Lady, Michelle Obama, on her book tour, Becoming, and she talks about the everyday aggressions, the everyday paper cuts you face. And then all of a sudden you look down and there's a accumulation, a lifetime of hurt that you've experienced that you just didn't realize was happening the whole time. I think for me, what fundamentally changed the trajectory of my life, and our stories are constantly being rewritten, is my father suddenly passing away in 2017. And so there's nothing like grief that resets your life. And you start to think about, what am I scared about? If I lost my life tomorrow, which is what happened to him, if I'm suddenly not here tomorrow, will I have done and said everything I wanted to? And so what am I waiting for? Because tomorrow is not promised. And so if I think about having always wanted to write, having always wanted to share my voice, having a lot of failed starts and stops, I think that was a big tipping point for me personally. And when I started to show up in a different way.
Thank you for sharing that. I have seen you share this story about your journey through grief and then coming on the other side, and your journey with writing the book itself, right? You spoke about the 1,000 cuts. So you have 13 cuts here that you really slice and dice.
Oh, I love that.
And I love them because every one of them, because I did the binge hearing with the audiobook.
Thank you.
There's a story you shared right at the beginning about your friend, Raj, the friend, Dr. Raj. We all know that we are that quote unquote friend for a lot of our, colleagues in the workplace.
Yes.
So could you unpack a little bit of that story for the folks who have not read your book, but then share your thoughts on how leaders and teams can build more cultural intelligence? I have one quick story I want to share. I think Olivia has heard this before, Mita. I was an 18-year-old intern at my company I was the first woman they'd ever hired, first woman of color they'd ever hired. It was my welcome to this company dinner date with the entire team. I'm sitting at the edge over here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. The VP of the department is in the front, and I have a guy sitting next to me. He's a white guy. He looks at me and he says, my first day, first dinner, "So you're Indian, right?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I have a question for you. Why do Indians smell?" And I'm an 18-year-old and I came off a plane. This kind of prejudice was just on a whole other level. So I took it upon myself for the remaining 18 years to be that Dr. Raj for so many. I ended up becoming that Dr. Raj, educating people on all aspects of everything about spices to whatever it might be about the whole Indian diaspora, which is not my job to do, right? So I'm going to turn this over to you and help decode this for us, please.
Well, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Imagine you're 18 years old starting your career, and that is just so hurtful and just cuts deep. That's the first interaction with that individual. And I know your story is all of our stories. Dr. Raj, dentist Raj. So I didn't actually know who this individual was, except I worked with a white woman who was convinced I should know him and said to me, "Oh, do you know my dentist, Dr. Raj?" Now, I lived at the time in Manhattan. She lived in Connecticut, I think. I don't even remember. I was like, this is so weird that we have this conversation every day. Well, Dr. Raj is my dentist. And oh, he speaks a language that starts with G. Do you speak other languages? And do you celebrate that holiday with lights? And do you eat sweets? And it was like every day. And I just wanted to say, do you know my dentist, Dr. John, who's a white man? Like, why would you think that I would know him? Again, I talk a lot about in the book about intent versus impact. So if I try to be objective, what were her intentions? She wanted to create some sort of connection or relationship with me. Yet the impact was I felt tokenized every day in every conversation. And you just get so exhausted that I'd smile and nod and go back to my email. I was like, I don't want to engage in this conversation. And I don't want to take the time, as you were saying, the burden of educating constantly. It's not the burden of Black and brown individuals from historically marginalized communities to drive education for the entire company every single day. No and no. And so I talk a lot about how this work starts at home. It starts at our kitchen tables. It doesn't start in our conference room tables. We're chasing inclusion almost in the wrong place because it all goes back to, do you have meaningful relationships with individuals who have different lived experiences than you outside of work? Because if I work for you and I have diversity of representation on my team, your next question should be, is Mita fit to lead this team? Is she actually fit to unlock the power of this team? And I don't think enough people are asking that question.
It's such a brilliant question. And I love the way you pivot that. And all of us have these stories, right? At this point in my career, I just smile. But I think Archita's example and your example, I'm just thinking of the countless, like when you're perpetually and only because of the state of our corporate spaces, right? It even happens when you become an executive. You get assigned these collateral duties, right? Where it's like, hold on, I don't speak for every Black American. Also, I'm Jamaican. So half of the culture, I don't even know. I don't know. Like we share the same hue, but culturally, I am not speaking for every person that has the same skin color as me. And so I love the concept for leaders. Leaders, we're speaking to you here when you say intent versus impact. You are responsible for that impact, even though your intentions may be good, right? I use the phrase well-meaning yahoos all the time, right? Because it's like they mean well, but it's,
oh my God. My husband, I think he used a similar phrase. Yes, well-meaning.
It's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
So your myth number 2 is I always allow everyone to speak in meetings. Of course, I'm an inclusive leader. In full transparency, I was one of those leaders, okay? And I want to address this because people think in our community that Olivia and I, we've seen the light and we don't make any mistakes. I think that the beauty of your book and debunking these myths is that we knowingly and unknowingly have been these leaders. We've looked up to these leaders and we consistently are surrounded by these leaders. So anytime we see this, what is the work we do to start breaking this down for ourselves? And it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So with regards to telling everyone, speak up, is not enough. So maybe dig in a little bit deeper there for us.
I mean, speak up is not enough. How many times have I been given a seat at the table, but my voice doesn't actually matter?
Mm.
I've been invited to meetings and I've shared these stories where I've actually been told to sit in the back, right? Even though there was plenty of seats at the table. Go sit in the back like it's a US Thanksgiving and I'm at the kids' table in a folding chair. Literally has happened to me.
Wow.
It is a check the box, right? When we say, oh, everyone just speaks, so I'm an inclusive leader. You haven't created psychological safety. You have comments about what I say. You shut me down. You steal my ideas. You minimize. You dismiss me. Also, I am an introvert. I'm a quiet leader. I pose as an extrovert for work, but most of the times in my career, I have not always been the loudest in the room. That doesn't mean I'm not going to have the most impact. But I take time to process my ideas. So what does that mean if I'm not the first to raise my hand or respond? Have we thought about the balance of how people receive information and how they like to communicate? Are you thinking about that as a leader, or do you expect everyone just to adjust to your style? Those are some of the things that I really want us to challenge. And having grown up in a US corporate culture, my God, is it like we worship at the altar of the extrovert? I know that's changing and I hope that's changing. But in my career, most of the individuals I have reported into have been extroverted white men. And so where do I see myself in that? If I don't see anyone who looks like me, but also I would say communicates like me, makes a difference.
Yes.
Yeah, it so does. And I want to ask this question here because Archita probably knows where I'm going with this. I think there's one thing in what we're all seeking to do is to educate leaders and to continue to educate ourselves. To Archita's point, we are not perfect. Every time we talk to one of our fantastic guests, I feel like we take away a nugget. Oh, heck, I do that. Let me adjust. As you learn better, you do better, right? Now, I think all of us have probably had these experiences where we get into the room and maybe not the way that we wanted to get access to the room because someone was like, dang it, need a black face, or dang it, need a black female face, or dang it, need an introvert in the room. And we get tossed in there for optics' sake. But what do you say to people? We as individuals have a responsibility once we're in the room too, right? And so how do you assert yourself, Mita, when you're in the room? A part of that teaching people how to treat you, right? Now you're in the room. How do you ensure that regardless of their intentions, your voice actually does get heard? How did you work your way through that from your early years into just getting into the room to now being like, you know what, this is my chair. I've brought it myself. I'm sitting here. You will listen. How did you get from A to B?
I love that question. You have to show people that you've earned the seat, particularly if you feel like you have been invited and it was a tokenistic invite or you were check the box. And so what that means is I am the queen of over preparing. I'm trying to under prepare more these days, but that means that if there is a pre-read, if there's a topic, if I was invited to a meeting and I know what's going to be discussed, I'm going to be prepared to contribute. And even to this day, we're all in meetings, right? You're in a meeting, something's presented, and then there's like a pause. And now I'm the first one to talk. I'm the first one to raise my hand. Because if I do that, then I start to build my confidence. And so I always have a question prepared. And now that I'm at an executive level, I have thoughts, or people are actually looking for my feedback, versus early on in my career, I just wanted people to know that, yeah, you hired me for my expertise and genius, and here it is. And so I have to be willing to speak up in the meeting. And then sometimes also the written form, following up with thoughts over Slack or email, or if there's a doc that's being shared. So there's many ways to do that. But remember, I think the one thing that always stuck with me was I remember once I was invited to this meeting and I had no business being in the meeting. That's how I felt. I was like, why am I in this meeting? All these senior people are there. They want me in this meeting? And I'll never forget, a colleague said to me, the vice president at the time, she said, that vice president invited you for a reason. Don't disappoint her. Like, she invited you because she knows you have something to contribute. And that was a flip for me, because no one likes to disappoint. We try not to disappoint people, but I thought, wow, yeah, the company is hiring me. They're paying me. And so I have a responsibility and obligation to share my thoughts. And I think once you do it over and over again over time, for me, it just becomes easier.
I love that.
Yeah, so people pleasing though, let's unpack that a little bit because that can go on to
How much time do we have?
Yeah, I
Let me
know.
take a sip of my tea.
I've been in some of your audio rooms and I want to unpack that a little bit because I think it's chapter 5 where you say we protect the a-holes because our business wouldn't run without them. So it's the a-holes that we usually put up on a pedestal and we give power to power, and then we give up all sense of our own like embodied power because we're like, hey, I've been in this room. I'm going to prove myself. I'm going to prove by hook
Sure.
or by crook that I'm deserving of the seat. And I just want to share some stats here because you've gotten a lot of different stats in your book from the US Workplace Bullying Institute. We have some stuff from Speak Out, that's some global statistics across 33 different industries. And what's fascinating there, it's very similar, right? Wherein when you're in these rooms with narcissists, and I'm giving language here, and the folks on our podcast have heard this language before, but when you're in the room with narcissists and you continue to grow within an organization, 91% of people have experienced some shape of bullying or harassment at work in our Speak Out service. 91%. It's what you say, schoolyard behavior comes into the workplace. It's not because of
Yes.
a workplace, etc. It's like by design. Parents in the schoolyard were like, he's just being a boy. No, he's not just being a freaking boy because he's going to sexually harass a woman in the workplace later on. And so that 91% though turns into 4% have any resolution. But 67% of the time, someone being there in that room who witnessed that workplace bullying and harassment.
Sure.
So if you are that target, because we're not victims, but if you are that target of workplace bullying and harassment, and as you unpack in chapter 5, which is myth number 5 about letting a-holes continue to be in business, how do you claim your power to continue on that thread of teaching people how to treat you so you don't slip into that people-pleasing mode over and over again to claim your seat at the table?
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Cream. If you are a corporate girly and you are struggling, you're feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling underpaid, overqualified, you're struggling with your boss, or bigger yet, you're even trying to clearly articulate what it is that you want from your corporate career, I am the coach for you. So if you're ambitious and you've got goals to accomplish and you want to accomplish them quickly, check out my website, oliviacream.com. I would love to help you reach your goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Archita Fritz, your other host of the Embracing Only podcast. If you're ready to leave corporate or you've changed a couple of corporate jobs and want to start a profitable side brilliance, you've made the decision, but you feel unsure of the next steps, here's how I can help you. I can guide you through a successful transition to entrepreneurship to help turn those ideas into profit. So reach out to me on LinkedIn or visit me on architafritz.com to accelerate your empowered transitions. Now, back to the episode.
I've been, unfortunately, in a number of bullying situations at work, one that was really toxic that lasted too long. And part of this goes back to my cultural upbringing. You don't quit. You don't quit people's spaces or places. You just work hard and you work through it. And it actually did a lot of damage. I lost a lot of pieces of myself because I thought I could outwork the bully. That doesn't work that way. And so now I know. And it is, having been bullied as a child, a teen and young adult, and as an adult, and being a target, you wonder, why are you continuously targeted? Are you doing something wrong? The thing that I've identified is the first time, I love Dr. Maya Angelou and one of her quotes that when people show you who they are the first time, believe them. Sometimes it takes me 10 times. I'm working on that. So if you show me the first time who you believe them, bullies they thrive on the power. And so the first time someone tries to put me in my place or says something unkind, a backhanded compliment, and it's in a work setting, I start to look for it now. And I start to set my boundaries and guardrails. It doesn't always work. It works for me now as an executive. It didn't work for me when I was an assistant brand manager. My other piece of advice is go where you're celebrated, not tolerated, right? You have to move on. You have to make an escape plan. And I'm not telling people that I'm not saying that you quit your job and that you don't have anything lined up and you have bills to pay. But as soon as there's smoke, I promise you there's fire. So start thinking about your plan before you've given too many pieces of yourself away, which I have done. And it gets really hard to show up to new employers and new opportunities because I was so broken. It was really hard to show up in these interviews and I was trying to leave, but I was just not in a great place mentally.
Mita, this is one that I feel like I have to spend some time and unpack. Archita knows this is my hot button, but I think culturally, we all fight some cultural ramifications.
Yes, we do.
Because especially as a Jamaican, there is no quitting us. Like we're fighting until the death. There's no one running me off. There's no quit in this dog. And you said something that hit me to the core, which is I can outwork the bully. I cannot tell you how many women we speak to on this platform and how many women I coach either professionally as a part of my day job or as part of the side hustle, where we have this mentality, we just have to work harder. We just have to work harder. And I want to impress upon our audience. There's this book that I read, Mind Your Mindset. And it really helped me reshape how I think about myself.
I'm writing that down.
Mind Your Mindset is amazing. I'm actually looking at it on my bookshelf right now. But it basically teaches you are the asset. There is no company without the people. Your presence and your talents are a gift to this organization. And when we start seeing ourselves this way, we tolerate less disrespect. And I love your thoughts on, look, we're not crazy. Everybody wants to live a certain lifestyle. Like you need money, right? You can't just be like, wow, somebody's being mean to me, I'm out. But you can be strategic to be like, oh, you doubt me? That's cool. Check this out. And you quietly plot to take your brilliance
Absolutely.
Where you were, again, celebrated, not tolerated. But I think there's something so powerful in recognizing that you, in fact, are the gift. Like It's the greatest lie that these corporations have made us feel like we should be grateful to be there. Yes, be grateful, but recognize that you are the gift.
I love that. I'm going to add my good friend and my podcast co-host, DC Marshall of Brown Table Talk, has taught me over the years, like always have the resume updated. I don't care how happy you are. So if you're listening today, make sure your resume is updated. That's your holiday gift to yourself. Update your resume and interview at least once a year. She always tells me, practice. Like, it's not that I'm actively looking, but you have to practice. You have to be ready when your time is ready, right? You have to be prepared and ready.
That's a great tip.
That is really great tip, because I know for a fact there are listeners on here who are like, well, but I'm comfortable now. My team is better. I have a better manager. I'm going to be okay because I had a good performance review. But we just went through like a whole slew of layoffs. I'm going to be fine. And then 2 weeks later in my DMs on LinkedIn, they're like, oh, Archita, guess what happened? So don't wait before the last straw drops or whatever the last thing drops. Prepare ahead of time to go in to the battlefield for yourself. Because as I learned through my own experience of bullying and harassment, Mita my mom told me this when I called her bawling and crying, oh, I can't believe all of this is happening. I felt like the world was against me, right? And she was like, your company owes you nothing. I believed that I drank the Kool-Aid because I was just like, I'm giving so much of myself and I'm on this ERG and I'm on this extra, whatever, all of this jazz. Of course, the company cares. And of course, the company is scared and did amazing things for me over the years. Don't get me wrong. But the company owes me nothing. And so this whole concept of, I used to be a leader, used to say this, but we are a family. Help us deconstruct that a little bit, because work is not family. And I've seen some posts out there a little bit, but people still get sucked into this. How do we recognize work is not family and how we got to disassociate?
Oh, I struggle with that analogy because I've bought into it over the years and then I bought out of it. I don't fire my family. I don't lay them off. I just don't. We're in it through thick and thin. So we have our ups and downs, but it's family. And so I don't understand how that analogy holds in a capitalistic society where you're for profit and it is about revenue. And guess what? I don't care what you're doing. You are selling something. We're all selling something if you work for an organization. And if you're not selling enough of it, you've got to control costs. So I respect that as a business person.
Yes.
You have to control costs and you have to make hard choices. Many of us have had to do that this year, but that's not family then. So we need to find another analogy for it. I don't believe the family analogy works. And I think it can be really harmful and hurtful when you've set up a situation where people think they're part of a family and then the family actually exiles you or asks you to go find another family.
Okay, so it's going to be a popular opinion. And I think this is because now this might be a little bit of the HR leader in me, but it might be a little bit of the military leader in me as well, Mita. Because I do think everything you agreed with, you said, I don't disagree with. At some point in time, you lose a family member because the business cannot sustain it and you have to cut heads for whatever reason. In our own families, we also have the weird uncle that no one really likes, that everyone talks crap about and wishes we could fire. They hang out anyways, and you do your best to not be disrespectful and tolerate them, right? But I think it's when we say family, at least from an HR perspective, I have this core belief that as a leader, if you don't love your people, you need to go do something else. And here's what I mean by this. I think excluding firing for a second here, when you love your people, you do everything from a place of love. You include them because you love them and you want their voices to be heard. You give them development conversations that may make you uncomfortable, but it's a gift to them to know where their gaps are so that they can develop and move on to the next level. Or if they're misaligned to role, giving them that feedback early so they're not working themselves into a tizzy in a direction that's never going to pan out for them, right? Having some of those tough conversations with love so that people understand exactly where they sit in the organization. So there is this little concept of family and how we treat each other while you're employed here that I tend to still embrace. But it's the balance here is just because we're saying we're family at work, don't let this mislead you into thinking you will never be fired. We are all expendable.
So that's where I think, especially if you're early in your career, the word family can be weaponized. Right. And so that's if you work on my team, I'm on your team, you're part of my community. But do I love you as much as my brother or my kids or husband? It's different relationships. And so expectations are set. And then people think, but I thought I was part of this family and now you're firing me or you're letting me go or so that's where I think we have to be careful. And I do appreciate and respect what you said, because I do think your number one job as a leader is to create more leaders. And if you actually don't love coaching people, then you shouldn't be doing that respectfully. And there's many things to be doing in this world, right? So I understand that.
Yes, I respect that, but I will say that I can really take care of my team. I can protect my team. I can create a safe environment for my team, but don't buy into this disillusionment. I've had friends who were on my bridesmaid, but that's a completely separate relationship that does not, is unencumbered by the minutia of the madness of we're one big happy family.
I had a mentor said to me years ago, Sherry, if you're listening, Sherry, she had said to me, Mita, if you die tomorrow, they're going to send a basket of flowers to your family and that's it. And that to me was wow. So that is a fact when I think about that family analogy, right? And what relationships and who's going to be there for you in some of the toughest times of your life. So
yes.
Good.
Absolutely. I would ask this question before we move on, because I know, Archita, you're getting ready to move on. Is this a two-part problem then, as I'm listening to you ladies? Is it part of, hey, corporations, stop using this language? Or is it up to us to be smarter to understand what it means?
Well, I think there's two things happening. I think that leaders want to use that language because we rally around it to create community. We haven't found other language. So I appreciated the intent of what you said. The impact lands differently for people, but the intent is, hey, we want people to feel excited to be here and know that their leaders care about them. So they lock their potential and it's unlocked for the company. And then I think with the employee side, and it's really interesting, I talk about the Edelman Trust Barometer survey a lot. I mention it in my book. Mm-hmm. And I think what's also happening is that when there's a loss of trust that people are feeling in government, no matter what side you're on, people are feeling lonely post the pandemic. Their ties to communities are being cut. They're worshiping less. They show up at work and they expect a lot of their employer. So they almost expect the employer to fill in for family. And so that's really interesting too, right? And you think Generation Z, and I think this is across generations, but certainly Generation Z statistically entering the workforce has said, I want to work for an employer that matches my values, what I believe. And so I think all of these things are coming to a head when we think about why the family analogy exists and how there's starting to have some cracks in that language.
Really love that. And that's so nuanced. We say in marketing, it depends. The answer is not black or white. It depends, which is true. And I think it's a nuanced way to look at it. And you're actually giving me a lot of food for thought here. So I want to actually step into another myth here, because performance review season. And we see this as we look at our lovely little rising star charts or individual valued contributor or whatever.
How do I become a high potential? Can someone tell me for years? Can I be on the HP list? The HP list. Why am I not on the HP list? What do I need to do to get
I can tell you. We'll have a separate chat.
Let me just tell you, because this is my hot button. We're rolling this out in my organization right now. So let's dig into this. I'm so excited for this.
Someone give me the secret sauce to being an HP.
An HP, exactly. The two that I'll really pull on is I'm all for diverse talent as long as they're good. This comes up in every talent review. She does the job, but is she a cultural fit? Does she get along? And what I love about your whole book, Mita, is not only, first of all, you give some really cool pop culture references, which is helpful, like all the way from the Friends Cafe, all the way through. But then you share the problem, but then you give actionable ways in which people can reflect and then correct, right? So for this specific thing, you give language of what people should consider and reflect on when they find themselves sharing this in these talent reviews. So could you maybe unpack that for our listeners here?
Sure. I mean, I've been called a diversity hire. In response, I say, I earned this seat. I'm not a diversity hire, but language matters. And so when we say things like, I'm all for diverse talent as long as they're good, have you ever heard someone say, I'm all for non-diverse talent as long as they're good? So one of the things I encourage people to do is ask open-ended questions. Well, tell me more. What do you mean by that? You mentioned that she's not a cultural fit. Could you give me some examples? Could we talk about with things like, I don't know if she'd get along with the rest of the team. I don't know if I could put her up in front of a client. I've heard things like, I don't know if I'd trust Mita to watch my kids. What does that have to do with your job? Like all sorts of things that you hear. And so if you can go back to, particularly for performance review season, Dee and I always talk about facts, not feelings, facts, not feelings. We all have a lot of feelings. Let's go back to the facts. So here we are talking about performance review. You mentioned Mita and being a cultural fit. Can we go back to what were her objectives? What were the results this year versus what we asked her to do? And has she exceeded them or has she not? Let's go back to the facts. And I think if you get people to self-reflect with open-ended questions, they sometimes get there on their own. It doesn't always happen in the first conversation, but the more you do it and the more you practice as a team doing it, you'll start to see people say, interesting. They might pause because they realize that they're actually talking about their own personal feelings versus the facts of the situation.
I love that tip, Mita. And as a HR leader, I'm so passionate about what you just said. And I think I've said this in previous episodes, but HR has a lot of responsibility. And I challenge my peers to do their jobs because we should be the one, as you're listening to these talent calibrations, right? That's why I love the talent calibrations, because you're discussing all your people in the group forum and you'll hear some of this nonsense. And what is my favorite activity in these calls is to call out one knucklehead so that the rest of them that are thinking it get like learning by proxy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I thought you were going to say well-intentioned Yahoo, but I'll go with go-ahead. Yes.
Yes, the well-intentioned. Well, sometimes they're not well-intentioned.
Sometimes they're not. Yes.
In these conditions. But I think you're so right. And I also think that there's a responsibility, unfortunately, but until society changes, we as diverse leaders have a responsibility to have a voice in these situations. You can't hear things like that and just be like, I'm minding my business. No, you have to engage, right?
Yes.
If we are going to occupy these spaces, then we need to positively contribute to the evolution of these spaces.
Yes.
And you can only do that by, if it irks you, imagine how the person who's not in the room to hear this nonsense feels. you have a responsibility to engage when it comes up. And even better, if it's in a group setting. So you kill multiple birds with one stone.
Absolutely. For anyone listening, I challenge you to think about whose career are you fighting for other than your own? We're all fighting for our own career. But imagine if somebody was saying those things about you. Just because Mita's not on your team, you have a responsibility. You have a privilege. You're sitting at that seat during talent calibration. Speak up.
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a good transition into, I'm trying to see what myth it is, but we're talking about speaking up and the potential hazards it has for you. And I think I want to go down this path, but I want you to unpack this for us because I think you're right. And there is some risk as we occupy these spaces, especially if you're an only on a leadership team. And we're here saying you have a responsibility to fight for not just your career, but for the folks coming up behind us. But there's some risk in that. We need to be cognizant of that. So can you unpack that for us?
So there will forever be politics, privilege, all of those dynamics of hierarchy happening in our workplaces. But I'm at a point in my career right now where I have everything to gain and nothing to lose. And I have earned it, and I have more seniority and power and privilege than I did before. So I have a responsibility to say something. It's very easy for me to say that now versus earlier in my career, where I keep thinking early mid-career, where were all the allies? Where were the people that could have stepped in who watched and did nothing and said nothing? Bosses' peers, my peers. But now it's different. And even in the way in which I do it, as we were talking about earlier, we call things by their right name. If something is racist, sexist, homophobic, we need to call them by their right name. But in situations where you're in a talent calibration and it's, well, Mita just doesn't have the potential. Oh, but John has a lot of potential. You keep hearing. So, but rather than being like, that sounds really sexist, I could just say, well, can we go back to how we're defining potential? Because here you're saying John has potential for the GM role, but Mita doesn't. But yet both of them, and looking on paper, have enough experiences to take the general manager role of Canada. So can we go back to how we define potential? So again, it's helping people self-reflect and unpacking some of those questions rather than just not saying anything or jumping potentially to an extreme, which could damage the relationship or also could put you in harm as a leader. And I totally understand that.
Couldn't agree more. There's clarifying questions. They're such an effective tool.
Yes, yes.
Very effective.
It's what coaches do, right? It's what I do when I coach people, but you're just coaching live in front of other people. It is exactly that.
And just to build on that, there is a cost to speaking up, yes. But when you're at a point of privilege, if you're sitting there doing a talent calibration, the cost for you is so low to speak up because you are in a place of privilege to have this kind of conversation. So don't lose that opportunity to speak up. So myth number 12, it's about we aren't apologizing. People need to stop being so sensitive. And I'm going to share a little story. This was right in the peak of, it's actually when the universe collided to have Olivia and me meet on a Teams chat. Because I was navigating the lovely world of Europe, Middle East and Africa, where, everyone thought that this was not a problem here because we've fixed colonization. We've fixed everything. This is not a problem here. We're well past this American hillbilly stuff. What are they talking about? Like, we've figured this out. So here I was trying to open minds up. And I remember I appreciate you, the leader, if you're going to listen to this, like, you're a great guy, but it's the same thing. This is the thing he told me is, Ashita, do you mean when people are concerned about microaggressions and being racist? I'm French, I'm speaking and people make fun of me, like my accent and stuff like that. Is it similar? And mind you, I was in a group of I was not middle-aged, I would say, but I was the woman of color in a group of white men, middle-aged white men. And I was being gentle with them because they were just like, actually, that people need to stop being sensitive. I face this every time myself because I'm French and I have language as a barrier. And I had to explain to him is that as you're walking down the stairs with your suit and you're going across the tarmac, people are not going to be like, oh, that French guy there, I wonder, blah, blah, blah. Well, I have people on my team. There was one of my team members who was a British guy who was black. He would never wear a tracksuit or anything to the airport because he's like, Achita, I cannot afford to show up like that because I would immediately be pulled up for some dang check. So you'd always be dressed up and people would be like, we're just chilling. We're going to Arizona for the sales meeting. Come on, just wear something relaxed. He's like, you don't understand. It cost me my life. It's dramatically different. So how do we coach folks who are on very wild ends of the spectrum of don't be so sensitive. I don't need to apologize for what I just said in a town hall to hundreds of people. How do we bring them along that journey?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to how we started this conversation. When you don't have access to enough lived experiences that aren't your own, you don't actually believe these things are happening.
Yes.
You don't believe they're happening because you haven't experienced them. Or you're trying to create a false equivalency. Like that gentleman, your colleague you're talking about, he obviously has faced microaggressions, but they're very different than someone else's microaggressions. And sometimes because we want to relate so badly, like I've been raised in a world that had trained me not to shut up. Like you're supposed to problem solve. And so some of these things you can't problem solve. And so sometimes we enter these conversations people want to bring in there, but that's happened to me. It's okay. You shouldn't be so sensitive. And we're like, well, you haven't had my lived experience. And this one thing that happened today, there were 20 other things that happened in the last 2 weeks that's built up to this one thing. So you might think I'm being sensitive and exploding today, but there's been a whole litany of things that I just have buried or haven't talked about. And so I think the more people can have access to people from different communities and understand what they've been through, it's like the head and the heart. Sure, you can show people statistics with the head, but the heart is, I actually really care about this now because I have a colleague who's experienced this and now I'm more attuned to it. And I'm less likely to disbelieve people or shut them down.
It's an interesting dynamic because I agree with you. I don't think it's human nature, right, to want to turn everything, you look at the world through the lens that you have.
Sure.
And to your point of helping people understand a different experience, it's sometimes wasted effort, right? If you have a colleague that is truly maybe just a well-intentioned Yahoo at this moment, and you're like, look, just go get some friends that don't look like you, go have some experiences, and then you'll understand. And they want to do the work. Awesome. Great. That one you can bring along. But there's a whole section of society that's going to believe what they want to believe because that's what they want to believe. Yeah. And they're just not going to change. So it's a constant, it's something that I wrestle with, if I'm honest, in the corporate space where it's like, how much time do I spend trying to give people different experiences in the hope that we can all just get along versus how much time do I spend just putting policies in place? So if you want to be a knucklehead, you can't work here, right? There's this delicate balance. How do you find that balance in your work in the DEI space?
So as a chief diversity officer, I have more conversations than I want to on this, but that's because I've chosen that work. How I choose to spend my time on the weekends and evenings, Mita, as a woman of color, I can create those boundaries. We go back to leadership. It's a privilege, not a right. Not everyone is just going to be anointed a leader, nor should you be. Finding other leaders who are further along their journey, who can talk to Mita, who has no idea what she's saying or doing and saying things that are harmful and hurtful and doesn't understand why they're harmful and hurtful. Well, what if I find John, who's a little later on his journey, to say, can you go talk to her? So I think that there are other ways to do that, particularly using individuals who have good relationships with their work to go ask someone else to actually do it. I think that also can go a long way.
Love this. I really want to bring it back to this false equivalency. I wrote this 2 words down. I have not heard this before, so thank you for giving me this gift, Mita. We've got to come to a close here. I want to take a Mita quote and then I'll close with that. But then Mita asked you to share with our audience where they can find you. They can buy your lovely book and all other places they can engage with you. So this is a quote of Mita's I'd request everyone on here to print out and put up on their desks. And please make sure you write Mita Mallick on the bottom and give her due credit. And it says, my job is not my only source of happiness. My job is not what makes me successful. My job is not my identity. I am quivering a little bit when I said that because it is the one gift we can give ourselves. So thank you for giving that to our audience and all of us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thanks for being part of my community. You can find me on LinkedIn, on Instagram. You can find the book, Reimagine Inclusion, Debunking 13 Myths to Transform Your Workplace, on Amazon and any independent bookseller, anywhere you buy books. And I'm really just overwhelmed that it's now a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. It was a long journey to get it published. So thanks for your support.
Thank you for being here, Mita.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mita. And hopefully everyone will continue to join her. And as always, if you are deciding from these conversations that you're in a place that does not suit you and you're looking to make a transition, or you're even starting to question, you're in the analysis phase, come talk to us. Archita and I would love to engage with you. And if you just want some quick help, we've also got some master classes that you can check out to get those brain cells going and get you stewing to figure out, is this the place where you continue to thrive or not? So as always, thank you for joining us, and take care of yourselves and take care of each other.